everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings, a day late again because I am just really not getting around to stuff right now. Work is hell. So, The Last Camel Died at Noon marks the point where these books really start to jump the shark. They've always been a little crazy because Amelia Peabody is just ever so slightly completely insane. But in this book, we get a shift. And it's kind of like we fell into Brendan Fraser's The Mummy, where the Magi appear and they're like, a line from ancient Egypt who are there for the purpose of keeping everybody from disturbing Imhotep and don't actually do that great a job at it in the grand scheme of things in the end. But, so in this one, basically, Amelia and Emerson get approached by a young man and his grandfather, sort of separately, sort of together, asking them to please try to find the grandfather's long-lost son. It's the other guy's older brother who vanished while on some sort of a quest in Egypt, and it turns out that years ago Emerson was actually, involved in the thing that he was questing after. Basically, the idea was that obviously Egypt was not the only ancient civilization at the time that it was being the ancient Egypt that we think of when we talk about it. You had other groups, like the Kushites, and so with these other peoples nearby and around and in neighboring regions, there were stories of that, you have interactions, and in this case, I don't know how much of this is true, how much of this is genuine research, and of course, everything has to be taken with the grain of salt that this is then contemporaneous belief about this Egyptological study, dating back to the year 1900, so you have to sort of place it in that context, but there's the idea of a nearby collapsing civilization and the thought that they may have made their way through a series of oases and along a river that doesn't exist anymore because Egypt is in a desert and things don't always last that are water sorts of things. And so somebody had basically decided to figure out the route and go along the route, except it's kind of a dangerous thing to go along because there is no water for days and days and days. So it's a risky thing to do. Particularly risky because you could find yourself out in the middle of nowhere and completely lost and without water and no way to get water before you fall over and die from dehydration. So, it's a whole thing, and they go along, and eventually they wind up being given some evidence that this man that they're looking for might in fact still be alive, so they go after him and his wife. And in the due course of events, it turns out that there is, in fact, a small surviving subculture of people who are still worshipping the ancient Egyptian gods in a way that is more or less consistent with, as far as anybody can tell at least, since obviously nobody in living memory has been to ancient Egypt and has not actually seen, how people actually worshipped or talked or what have you. But they find their way there, and they, look around, and they find out that indeed this man that they were looking for did wind up making his way there, and in fact wound up basically living out his life there. And so there's just this whole mess about them being there and trying to figure out whether he's still alive or not, because people are lying to them and using euphemisms and nobody's quite sure. And as an example, at the end of the book, you find out that the wife has in fact been alive all this time, but that when they said she would, went to the goddess, they didn't mean that she had simply joined the priestess, become a priestess. They didn't mean she died. It was that she had literally gone into some sort of postpartum depression thing, and sort of just had a complete psychotic break, and decided to dispense with everything about who she was before and become essentially one of these people. And it's not just going native, it's like sort of a self-enforced and induced amnesia and refusal to accept anything. And because she was pregnant when they were captured, so she gave birth and like this happened. And the person who had wound up being their ally in this place to allow them to eventually escape, they said, well, why didn't you tell her? And he's like, I couldn't. She's 12. I'm not going to tell her that her mother hated her and her father so much that she decided to go and hole up in a wall somewhere to become a priestess thing because she hated them. I'm not going to do that to her. Let her believe her mother is dead, because her mother is in all practical terms dead, because the woman has basically given up any connection to her previous identity or anything. So just let it be. Anyways, so this whole thing is endlessly punctuated with a hypnosis subplot that doesn't really go anywhere, because their son Ramses gets hypnotized and has clearly been hit up with a bunch of post-hypnotic suggestions, but those never actually they're plot points until they don't need to be plot points anymore, and then it just kind of vanishes. So that was a little bit of a thing, but the fact that you have a hypnosis plot in this is already, wild. And the finding these effectively modern ancient Egyptians is fascinating. And of course, you continue to have Ramses being himself. That is, Ramses has apparently started to get a little bit better about talking too much, but he's still only 10. And he has such a long-term history of talking and talking and talking and not getting to the point and being deceptive, that basically when he tries to tell his parents important pieces of information, they ignore him, because he's basically been so obnoxious about stuff that they've had to give up. Ramses actually, interestingly, doesn't get into or cause nearly as much trouble in this one, and I think it's because they spend basically the entire last half of the book in trouble, and in serious enough trouble that even Ramses, with his insistence on exploring and animal rights and all kinds of other stuff, has the realization that it's really, really not the time. But the fact is, he's done that so much in the previous books that there's a bunch of information that he's wound up collecting that his parents don't get until much later than they could have used it for, because they're ignoring him, because Ramses has basically made himself into somebody that everybody wants to ignore. Also, we are introduced to Nefret, who is the daughter of the English couple who went missing. Remember, I did say that the wife had, developed postpartum depression or something. Nefret is their child, and she gets, raised in these ancient Egyptian surroundings, but it is agreed upon by her and by their, friend, associate person who had wanted their help with helping him keep his brother off of the throne, because his brother is a horrible person and he's trying to modernize his people, in no small part because he realized that they are a very, very technologically primitive people, and the English are very much, by comparison, not, and that at some point somebody was going to find them, and at that point they were going to get overrun if they were not ready to meet the English on their own terms. That is, he's basically hoping to pre-civilize everybody in line with how the English view civilization, so that if the English get there, they don't have any way to latch on and say, oh yes, we're going to civilize, because they're already civilized. There won't be anything the English can do to civilize them. Or at least that's basically what he's hoping for, sort of to steal a march on the inevitability of English colonialism, which, I mean, all more power to him, because, like, you know, it's one of those things where you wonder how much better so many native peoples across the world might have done if somebody had given them, like, 10 years warning about the English or the French coming, given them that warning so they could say, okay, here's what they're going to do, so here's what we have to say in return, here's the things that we do in response, so that they don't have any reason to react the way that they would. You know, no way of knowing, but in any event, that's sort of what he's aiming for. The title of this, by the way, is remarkably literal and plot relevant, in that they go out and they set out across the desert, and of course you bring camels, because camels are like the best desert pack animal. You know, they're naturally evolved to be in deserts, so you don't need to feed them tons and tons and tons of water. They're strong, they handle walking across sand well. You bring camels. But the camels just start dropping dead as they walk along, and the last camel dies at noon. And that's the day that they find themselves basically lost out in the desert, and all of their accompanying servants decide to, like, head off at a dead run and steal all the water, and yeah, it becomes a thing. So this is, it's an entertaining book. It's an exciting yarn. Amelia is as slightly off kilter as she always is, perplexing her husband. Ramses isn't nearly as talkative as he used to be, which I suppose is, on the one hand, kind of a pity, but on the other hand, a good call on Elizabeth Peters' part to keep us from having to put up with the little brat, because, frankly, nobody wants to put up with him. And we get out of this with Ramses having a serious crush on Nefret, because she is blonde and extremely pretty, and Ramses basically has almost no exposure to other kids his age, so I suspect he's going to be remarkably susceptible to smart children his age, because he, like, has no idea how to deal with other kids. Like, Amelia really should have sent him to a school, and I'll be honest, I am leaning towards the idea that he probably should have been sent to a school where they thrash the children, because he might have actually learned to stop talking sooner if that happened. But anyways, yeah, it's a fascinating book, but this is sort of the first step to these books' gradual descent into, I don't know where we are. Where are we? This isn't reality anymore. Where we are is not normal. But we're not there yet. This is just a step of weirdness. So, yeah. I don't really have anything else to say in particular. And I guess that's everything, and I will see you all next week.